Okay, this is a passage 4 question, and it's on the right hand side. We see it's got scatter plots. And I'm just going to, again, just barely look over the passage and the graphs just to get some idea where things are, but I'm not really reading to try and understand too much. So we'll start at passage 4 and I'll increase the size of this a little bit. To increase corn crop yield, that's the amount produced, fertilizer, nitrogen is added to soil to supplement soil test N, which is various naturally occurring N sources in soil. In a responsive soil, the yield is greater when the fertilizer is added than when fertilizer is not added. In a non-responsive soil, the yield does not change when fertilizer N is added. Okay, so we've got that bit. And then this just talks about amino. I'm just trying to get words so that when I can match the words in the question to here. So that says amino sugar. 2 studies were done. Amino sugar and soil test N were examined. Okay, so not trying to understand it, just trying to get my bearings really. So let's put this down and see where we go. So on to the questions. Suppose 18. Suppose another cornfield in the same area had been included in study 1. All right, so that's going to be our first step, is find study 1. And that the soil in this field had been found to have a soil test N content of 200. Right, so soil test N content of 200 milligrams per kilogram. That's going to be step 2. Find that. Based on figure 1, that's going to be part of step 1. This soil's amino sugar N content would most likely have been closest to which, so this is number 3, find out what the value is at 200 milligrams. All right, simple steps 1, 2, and 3. So I'll increase this so we can see we're talking about study 1 and we're talking about figure 1. That's step 1 done. Got it. Step 2, a soil test N content of 200 milligrams. So we find out what axis is measuring the soil test N content, and we see that it's up here, soil test N milligrams per kilogram, and we want 200. So we find 200. Step 2 is done. Right. The soil's amino acid sugar N was closest to. So we find out where amino sugar is, and we see that it's along the bottom here. So we take this out to, this is 200, we take it here, and we drop it down to find out what the amino sugar thing, and that's about, I would say about 175. And we see that there in answer G. Next question. Consider the cornfield with soil that had an amino sugar N content of 350, right? Sugar N content 350 in study 2, right? So study 2 will be our first one. We always find the location first. Finding sugar N content of 350 will be our second thing. Based on figure 2, all right, that's part of our first step because it's study 2, figure 2. Find our location. Other information provided was the soil in the cornfield. And other information provided. Was the soil in the cornfield responsive or unresponsive? All right, so that's going to be step 3. So I know when I read it, and this is why I just read it, just to kind of get where words were. I know that responsive and unresponsive occurred here. Oh no, that's study 1. Hang on, I've got to put it down again. It came up here, didn't it? Yeah. In a responsive soil, the yield is greater when the fertilizer is added. Non-responsive soil, the yield doesn't change. All right, so we know what responsive and unresponsive means. So what was step 1? We're looking at study 2, figure 2. So that's study 2, figure 2. Right, and I'll increase this because I think we just look at the graph after that. Step 2 was we find sugar N content of 300 milligrams. Where is sugar N content? Amino sugar, sorry. Amino sugar N content. So amino sugar N is across here. And we're looking for 350. And that would be about there, right? So that's step 2 done. We've done 1 and 2. We've got them. And then it says, based on figure 2 and other information provided, was the soil in the cornfield responsive or unresponsive? Well, the what's been measured up this way is the percent increase, right? So responsive soils, their yield increases when the fertilizer is added. In an unresponsive or non-responsive, the yield stays the same. And we see here at 350, it's zero. Nothing. There is no increase at all, which means, because again, this is percent increase up the side here. This is increased, not a jot. So that answers, if we go back to the answers, it's one of these two answers say the same bit at the beginning and two say something different. We know that it's non-responsive. That means we get rid of A and B. Now we just have to get the right reason. Non-responsive, C says non-responsive because the yield did not increase. That is right. And that would be C. It did not increase. Okay, going on to question 20. In the two studies, the purpose of oven drying the mixed soil was to remove all the, oven drying the soil, moisture, organic matter, soil test N, amino sugar N. I mean, if you oven dry anything, you're getting rid of the moisture. And seriously, during the test, I would just go with that answer. I mean, getting rid of the organic matter, that's like leaves and everything else. Putting it in the oven doesn't get rid of leaves and stuff. You're not getting rid of anything. You're just getting rid of moisture. I mean, it's just a common sense thing. But for the sake of this, I was just going to look and see if it mentions anything about soil drying or oven drying. I just saw it there. Collected, it says then thoroughly mixed and oven dried for 24 hours. The dried mixed soil for each field was analysed for amino sugar and soil. So obviously you're not going to try and take out the amino sugar content of the soil test because that's what you're measuring. You're not drying it to take it out. So yeah, the answer is F. But yeah, I would have just put that F in as my answer in about 2 seconds. 21. According to the results of study 2, all right, that's going to be our step 1 is find study 2. What was the greatest percent increase in yield for a cornfield? All right, so that's what was the greatest increase in yield for a cornfield, and what was the amino sugar N content of the soil in the cornfield. All right, so that's 3. So again, we're just doing 3 steps. So we're looking for the greatest percent increase in yield for a cornfield and what was the amino sugar N content of the soil in the cornfield with that increase. All right, so we're going to do step 1, which is find, I'll get rid of this, study 2, and that's over here. And then we're going to look at the graph. And what's the greatest percent increase? Remember, we found the percent increase up here. So the greatest is going to be the one that's the highest, right? Because this is percent increase. So it's going to be this one here. It's going to be at 120 because it's the highest one. So that's step 2. Hang on, we did step 1. We've done step 2. We found the greatest percent increase. And then it just asks us the amino sugar N content of the soil in the cornfield at that value. So we're just going to bring this down because amino sugar is across the bottom. And then we're just going to bring this down. That's a wobbly line, but it's around about, I kind of veered off to the, it's probably about 60 or something. So again, we look back at the answers and it's got one of these. So the first one, I'm sorry, I'm jumping a bit all over the place. Come back to the right hand side. This value is just over 120. So if we look at the answer choices, 2 of them have 120 or 122. So we can get rid of A and B. And then we sort of said that this is about 60 odd. And the only one that has something that's 60 odd is C. There we go. Again, just a simple 3-step process, we get the answer. And we're going to go to 22. By selecting cornfields that were all located in the same 1,000 hectare, the researchers who performed the studies ensured that which of the factors listed below would be nearly identical for all the fields. Number 1, rainfall. Yeah, I mean, you can't have rainfall just in one part of a field and not another. So yeah, the rainfall is going to be the same. So that one stays in. So H goes out because it only has 2 and 3. The amount of sunlight, well, yeah. I mean, you can't, again, the sunlight's just going to be over a very large area the same. So 1 and 2, so that gets rid of F because it says it's only 1 only. So we're down to G is still in because it says 1 and 2, and J is still in because it says 1, 2, and 3. So we have to see is 3 valid? The amino sugar N content. Well, no, that's what we're measuring. That's getting changed, right? I mean, if you look at the diagrams, even just look to the right here, this is getting changed. So it's not the same. It's not being held the same. So that means it'd be 1 and 2 only, and that is G. Okay, and then we'll come down to 23. Squish that down a little bit. Oh, a lot then actually. Well, this is the last question. All right, that was quick. One of the cornfields involved in the studies had an area of 2.5 hectares. In study 2, all right, that's step 1. Step 2 will be something to do with 2.5 hectares. How many kilograms of N was added to the field as fertilizer? And that will be number 3. Again, 3 steps. Step number 1, we find study 2. Oh, we've done that already. I'll take this away. And then we're looking at, okay. So the graph doesn't say anything about hectares, right? What does that mean? It means it's going to be in the passage here. It's going to have to be here because the graph doesn't say anything about it. All right, so we're going to have to read this little passage. So the next spring for each field, soil samples were collected, mixed, dried, and analysed for amino sugar N, as in study 1. After collection and before spring planting, fertilizer N was added to each field, here it is, at a rate of 120 kilograms per hectare. There we go, we've found it. So step 2 is so that we've actually answered, no we haven't. So it's 120 for 1 hectare. We have 2.5 hectares. So we're going to have to multiply this by 2.5, and that comes to 0. That's and that's 3. So it comes to 300 kilograms of N. And that was easy enough. If it's 120 for 1 hectare, what is it for 2.5? We just multiply 120 by 2.5 and you've got your answer. And that is passage 4 complete.